Alexander, Russian interpreter. Can we kindly test you on the Russian channel? Great. Thank you. And can we test when you switch to English, please?
Testing, testing. Alexander speaking in the English channel.
Lastly, thank you so much.
Good. Hello. If you are already in the room and you will need interpretation, please do grab the headsets out so you can be able to access translation services. For those outside, we would really appreciate if you can start coming in because we are starting the session very soon. Thank you.
You're moderating, yeah? Jagan Chapagan has a really hard deadline on the 6th.
Yes.
So my apologies now. What I'll do is work. Do you know which one he's going to sit in?
So,
Jagan goes right.
We will appreciate if you can please settle down. We are starting the session now. Thank you so much. Please do come in and settle down. And also please grab the handsets or the headsets when you're coming in, especially if you need translation. Please do settle down. We're starting the session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today on this very special session on comprehensive approaches to reduce loss and damage, bridging climate action, and disaster risk reduction. So before we start, just want to share a few reminders on housekeeping. So first of all, the session is available in all 6 official UN languages. If you need translation, as mentioned earlier, please take the headset and select your preferred language. And for those joining us online, we also have this option available. Please use the video player, but do not forget to mute the video player. Otherwise, you will get the language or you will get the translation as well as the interpretation. Another thing I wanted to share is also, if you are tech savvy or you also really want to give updates on social media about the session, please do not forget to share about the session using our hashtags, Act for Resilience Today and Everyday Count hashtag. My name is Fatou Jeng. I'll be your moderator for the session today. Today, June 5th, we commemorate World Environment Day. It is a reminder about the escalating impacts of climate change around the world. But most importantly, for us to reflect on these and commit to take more action to protect communities and people to build their resilience in adapting to the climate and environmental disasters. We meet today at this very important session because around the world, communities are not just adapting to the climate crisis, but they are also absorbing the cost with little support. Loss and damage is no longer a future threat. It is a present reality because the IPCC 6th assessment report has already warned us about the dangers that are actually associated with the climate crisis, and it's impacting billions of people around the world. So it's about making sure that we're taking impacts, we are taking action, we're building collaboration and partnership. So this is why our session today, it's about action. It's about breaking silos. It's about building partnerships. But most importantly, exploring how countries, communities, and institutions are building resilience and responding to the impacts. So this is why our session today is going to be very interactive. We will engage you throughout the session, and we invite you to just not listen, but to also engage, whether you are here or those that are actually joining us online. So we are going to start first by having a Slido QR code online. So please do scan the QR code or enter the codes that are there, because we have a few questions we would like to ask you to help us kick off the conversation. So the first question we would like to ask to you, please do scan the QR code. What are some specific elements of disaster risk management that are necessary for minimizing and addressing loss and damage? We would love to hear from you to help us kick off the conversation and engage our very amazing panelists here today who are going to share their expertise as well as contribution to the session. Okay, early warning systems, I am not seeing, but I will try to come down quickly. So some of the answers we're having are early warning systems, prevention, meaningful community engagement, anticipatory actions, data. I'm sorry, our panelists are not able to see the responses, but they are very interesting. Oh, you're seeing it now. Great. So already from our participants, we can really hear their thoughts about what we need to do to make sure we are minimizing and addressing loss and damage. So interestingly, early warning systems is one of the top things we can see there. Prevention, data, risk reduction. So this really helps us to have a very good start of the session. And I will start with Honorable Minister Raf. He is the Minister for Climate Change, Adaptation, Meteorology and Geohazards, Energy, Environment and Disaster Management for Vanuatu. Honorable Minister, from the response we can see already, there is no doubt that priority of Vanuatu on loss and damage. And obviously we are very keen to see the outcomes from the various initiatives that are actually being pursued. So we would love to hear from the work that your government or your ministry is doing, especially on your priorities in terms of loss and damage.
Thank you so much, and good evening, my distinguished panelists and everybody here tonight. I come from Vanuatu. It's one of the most climate vulnerable nations in the world, but also, I'm proud to say, a powerful voice for climate action. And I'm also delighted to announce that we've become the first country to receive technical assistance from the San Diego network as of this week, just announced. So that's fantastic. Thank you to everyone involved. And it's important because we, as a small island developing state, we are now experiencing simultaneously the failure of adaptation and increasing loss and damage as we face disasters growing in scale and intensity and frequency. So I just want to outline some of the ways in which we're trying to integrate loss and damage approaches with DRR and the lessons we've learned. So a legislative and policy framework. We developed the first DRM and DM national plan, action plan in the Pacific in 2006. And also we were among the first Pacific countries to integrate approaching climate change and disaster risk through the National Advisory Board for Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction in 2012. Subsequently, we created the ministry that I'm now the minister of, which is, and I'll read it out, Ministry of Climate Change, Meteorology, Geohazards, Energy, Environment and Disaster Management. So integrating them within a ministry, one of 13 portfolios. And then we, through the Geological Hazards and Climate Change Act of 2016, we created the National Advisory Board. And the National Advisory Board is chaired by the Director General of the Ministry of Climate Change and has almost all the government department directors in it. And it also has the CEO of the National Association of NGOs, an observer status for youth in the private sector. And it has the mandate to deal with all programs and policies across all government departments that address climate change. And when it comes to a disaster, in terms of disaster response as well. And so this integrated approach, right from the ministry through legislation into policy, is something that assists us in integrating DRR and loss and damage. In terms of our policy approach, we were the first country in the world to actually cost loss and damage needs in our NDC. And recognizing this is a critical pillar of climate change, not only mitigation, adaptation, but loss and damage. And our new NDC 3.0 that's coming out in a few weeks will feature a dramatic increase in loss and damage commitments, almost more than 25. And this year also we launched a very comprehensive national policy on loss and damage, which defines loss and damage in local terms and places it in a broader context of climate action, humanitarian response, sustainable development, and human rights. So for the full typology of responses, including early warning systems, insurance and risk transfer, these are covered in this policy. It will be on our website if people want to see it before Bonn to give any comments on it. We've also just commenced work on a national adaptation plan, and we're actually renaming it. It's not going to be our national adaptation plan. It's going to be our national adaptation and loss and damage plan. And that's because it reflects the realities of our communities and what they're experiencing now. In terms of financing, we have the normal things of an automatic release of 1.5% of our national budget after each disaster automatically is released. We have financial emergency fund, and we can have automatic reprioritization of line agency recurrent funding to do with DRR. We have a national disaster risk financing policy, which we just passed last year, but I think the important thing I want to say here is that financing is not enough, and we all know that. And there's an urgent priority to integrate DRR into in an expanded adaptation effort while addressing accelerating loss and damage, as these adaptation limits are already breached. Finance is wholly inadequate, not only in volume, but in form and quality. It's fragmented, it's project-based, delivery through external systems, determined by people beyond our borders. And so simply to say that the heart of our climate finance platform is the simple principle, trust and use our national systems. And we keep saying this, and we want to see it happen. So we have legislated a number of climate funds, a loss and damage fund, a green energy fund, environmental trust fund, and we're already delivering through these mechanisms. They're audited, and there's reports presented to Parliament each year. I want to give an example. From last year, I want to applaud the Government of New Zealand, who gave us direct climate flexible finance support, which we determine through our National Advisory Board what we're going to spend it on. And so we've used some of it for mitigation targets, some of it for loss and damage, some of it disaster risk early warning systems. And this is an example of what we're going to see more of. We're seeing the EU do it also with Australia, New Zealand, the World Bank, and the ADB. But that's triggered by conditionality, and in this case, the launch of our national loss and damage policies. Coming down to implementation, I don't know how much time I have, probably at the end of it, 1 minute. We're really focusing on community disaster and climate change committees right down at the local level for first level assessment, first level response, and also implementation of just building resilience in the communities. Our communities at local level are the experts. They know exactly what is in their communities. They know what happens after disaster. They know what are the loss and damage needs, what are the resilience needs. So integrating them as much as possible, empowering them. We have the largest GCF community targeted project in the world, the Vanuatu Community-Based Climate Resilience Project. And through that, we're putting satellite technology into local area councils, which link to community disaster climate change committees, making sure that they're representative of all the different sectors in the community, and then putting them as much as possible in the front line of responding and making sure their communities are resilient. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister Raf. I think the way we're going with the time management, if we continue with this, we'll definitely end at 6 p.m. So you've mentioned really interesting things about integrating and also making sure that we have a more comprehensive approach towards DRR and climate action. And you've cited really great lessons that have been made or learned from your ministry, especially in terms of being the first country in the world to cost loss and damage in its NDCs, and also having a comprehensive policy on loss and damage highlighting sustainable development, human rights. And you've mentioned something very important, that financing is not enough. We need to make sure that we are integrating DRR among others in our policies, and also that financing is mostly fragmented and project-based, and we need to do away from that. You wrapped up by also highlighting something very important about the importance of community knowledge and their expertise in DRR. And we need to make sure that we are providing platforms to them as well as tools for them to continue to be actively engaged. And I think this is something that is very important because around the world we also see how community members are actually in the front line responding to disasters, but most of the time their local knowledge are not effectively included. So how do we make sure it is integrated is something that's very important and you've actually touched on well. And I will move to Kamal. Kamal actually has just joined us, and I'm sure you have had a bit of what Minister Raf has actually mentioned in terms of the work that his ministry is doing. But just to nudge you a bit, UNDRR has actually been active in the loss and damage space and has been advocating for comprehensive approaches in tackling loss and damage. We would like to also hear your reflections on the importance of such comprehensive approaches.
Thank you very much for that question. I will first of all start by saying that in 2015, we adopted the Paris, the Sendai, and SDGs. And on Sendai, we've made some progress, which is basically reducing the loss of lives. But on all the other loss reduction targets, we are not doing well. And that is because of, number one, there are more people now living in hazard-prone areas. Even if the vulnerability is going down just a little, there are just more people. And back in 2009, when the UNDRR produced its first global assessment report, we used to say that the driver of risk is increasing exposure and increasing vulnerability. We took hazard as a sort of a constant. That's no longer the case. So the hazard, particularly related to weather and climate, is changing very rapidly. It's changing. We talk about intensity and frequency, but it's also changing in geography. There are parts of the world which didn't see floods are seeing floods now, extreme rainfall events. Parts of the world that hadn't seen drought are seeing years of consecutive drought. In some cases, you just see the sort of flipping of this geography in some countries. So in such a case, to put disaster risk reduction practice in one box and to put climate change adaptation in another box is really artificial. It has to all come together. It really has to be a comprehensive approach to disaster and climate risk management. That's really essential. It's not really, something that is nice to do. It's not just conceptually elegant. It's existentially important. So I think that's the point I would make, and I think there is a lot that the practice of disaster risk reduction, of having dealt with floods and droughts in the past, can bring to it, but that practice needs to be updated to deal with not just the risk, but also a fair bit of volatility and uncertainty in our weather and climate systems.
Really, we're doing so well on timing. I must give this to our speakers. Thank you so much, Kamal. You've also mentioned really important points, especially around hazard related to weather events, as well as how we're seeing of recent really rapid changes around the climate, especially with extreme weather events. And you've also cited how we're seeing increase in droughts, among others. And I am from Banjul, the Gambia, which is the capital city of the Gambia. And over the years, we have seen a rapid increase in heat waves. In the last years, we have seen how it becomes really, really hot during the summer. And also we have seen when it rains, most of our communities are actually flooded. Like extremely flooded, that at some point crocodiles will actually have to get out of the bridge to actually seek shelter in people's houses. So these are all really serious changes that are actually happening when it comes to climate disasters. And it's really important for us to discuss, as you have mentioned, how to not put things in boxes, put climate in a box, put disaster in a box. Everything needs to be done in a way that is more collaborative, but also to break silos, because when we break silos, it makes it difficult for us to take collective actions. And this is something that's really good that you've actually brought up in the discussion. And you've mentioned in 2015, the Sendai framework was adopted and the SDG goals were also adopted. But also something really interesting also happened in Paris, the Paris Agreement, which people obviously talked about, a landmark agreement in the climate space. And this will bring me to Mr. Benoit Faraco, who's the ambassador for climate negotiations for decarbonized energies and for the prevention of climate risk from France. So it marks a decade since the adoption of the Paris Agreement in France. I was quite young, but I was definitely following the conversations that were happening because I think I was in high school. But your country actually remains really committed to climate action in numerous ways, among which is shaping the ongoing operationalization of the fund for responding to loss and damage, which we have the director here, my brother Ibrahim from Senegal, and you are serving as the co-chair of the board. So what are your views on scaling up climate action, especially with regards to averting and minimizing, as well as addressing loss and damage? Mr. Farajo.
Yeah, thank you so much. And of course, I was youngest also in the Paris negotiation. And I was one of the few probably in this room who were happy to be in Sendai, in Paris, but also in Nairobi in Addis Ababa for finance for development, and in New York for the SDGs. And I think the consistency of this agenda by the founding father of all these topics is still relevant today. And it's very important for me, especially in this year, because we will probably be celebrating the 10 years of the Paris Agreement, but as Minister from Vanuatu recalled it, it's not a celebration for a lot of people on the ground because, I mean, what 10 years of climate action, of insufficient climate action on the ground mean increase also of loss and damages, impact on the ground on population. So it's a very awkward anniversary, but we need to be proud of what we've done in the Paris Agreement and also to be proud on what has been delivered after that. I mean, the Santiago network, the first commitment to the fund on loss and damage. It was very quick at the end of the day. When you look, it's only like 3-4 years ago. And what I see from the French perspective is that those guys are delivering on the ground, and it's very interesting. And it's very interesting to collectively send also this message of consistency of action between our agenda on disaster risk reduction, but also on loss and damage and climate adaptation, because I don't know what is the perspective in each of your country, of my dear French panelists, but when you ask French people what is it a climate-related disaster? Is it natural risk? I mean, at the end of the day, they really don't care. What they want is response, prevention, action, solidarity, justice, whether it's climate justice or national or domestic solidarity or international solidarity. I mean, the expectation of the people are quite the same. So that's why this consistency between all of these elements of our agenda are so relevant. And maybe it's time also for now, because and France has been very committed to this agenda on advancing both on loss and damage, and we pledge more than 100 million in the fund, but also in various initiatives that contribute to disaster risk reduction, such as the climate risk early warning system initiative that we contribute to launch in the course of the Paris Agreement. And I think it's time also to take advantage of early movers, such as Vanuatu, to learn back from the ground, including because I totally take the point on what has been said on money. Money will be important in this conversation, definitely. And we will need more public money, and that's why under the framework on the Paris Pact for People and Planet, France is advocating for global solidarity levy because, of course, at the end of the day, we will need a chunk of public money and global and international solidarity to support those on the ground in the most vulnerable country that suffer the worst impact of climate change. But this position that France will bring with us in Brazil, in COP30, in Belém, and so on, allow us also to speak freely about the role of private finance, of investment, on the balance between what we can do in terms of reparation and prevention, And it will be very important. And what we are looking forward also to Belém is to discover what under the loss and damage mechanism, what under the crew initiative are we concretely delivering, what is a success, but also what is missing. So that's why we need to consider that over the last 10 years, celebrating the Paris Agreement, yes, we had great pilot projects, but that are not totally at scale. And I think that was also the message from Vanuatu. We need to change scale. When you integrate adaptation and loss and damage in your national contribution, it's because you have a broader vision of the future that will need a broader integration of all these elements. And I think it would be very important for us to showcase this in Brazil, not only to demonstrate that loss and damage, our technical mechanism, what we are doing under DRR, and the progress we are making on DRR. And to be honest, progress is our good news, because there is not so much international fora where we have progress right now. Yes, we have progress, but there is also a lot to do. And to be honest, and to be totally blunt, this agenda on loss and damage and DRR must also come always with a recall that we need to have a conversation on mitigation during the COP30 in Belém. It's necessary because we are not on track. It's necessary because it's the best way to avoid dramatic consequences on climate change on the ground. And we need to basically recall this. It's obvious for most of you in the room, sometimes not for everyone in this planet, and I think it's part of the conversation we need to bring with us. So new public money, using global solidarity levy, building experiences, delivering on the first country on loss and damage, it will be key, but also mitigation.
Thank you so much, Mr. Benoit. As you've mentioned, we are not on track. It's still a challenge for countries that have committed to the 100 billion fund to actually even accomplish that. Every year in climate negotiations, we talk about climate financing. We talk about climate adaptation. We talk about loss and damage. But there is still a significant gap in terms of the progress that we're supposed to make, because vulnerable countries continue to be impacted. Marginalized communities continue to be impacted. The climate crisis really is not waiting for anyone. And this is why we need to make sure we need to be on track, because it's just going to exacerbate. As you have mentioned, Mr. Benoit, people have actually shared some key things, especially in terms of responding to disasters, but also in the climate problems. You've mentioned some of the things that they share, like response, prevention, preparedness, respect, and solidarity. And these are even some of the things that participants have actually shared in terms of some of the actions that are supposed to be taken. Many of them actually have shared how we need to make sure there is more prevention, because when we prevent, then we are able to at least address the damages that come with it. But when we sit and wait until the damages come, it becomes difficult for us to prevent and take actions. So thank you so much for sharing these very insightful contributions. And as you've mentioned, we need more money. Honorable Minister Raf has actually mentioned that we need money, and Benoit has actually echoed that we need more money. And this is why we're going to come to the person that will bring us the money, which is Mr. Ibrahim, who is a brother from Senegal. We are actually quite neighbors. Gambia, Senegal, literally the same country. We speak the same local languages, eat the same food. The only difference is they speak French and we speak English. That's why if maybe you've observed when I was pronouncing Mr. Benoit's name, I would say Mr. Benoit Faraco, so I can sound more French because I'm trying to learn French. So, Mr. Ibrahim, we've heard from our previous speakers really emphasize on the issue of funding and financing. And we understand the fund seeks to help vulnerable communities to recover from climate-related loss as well as damages. Expectations from the fund are really very high. So can you please, first of all, share the latest on the operationalization of the fund, but also as the core convener of the high-level dialogue on loss and damage? What, according to you, were its main highlights? How do you see the role of DRR in complementing the fund's effort? So all eyes are on you.
For Fatu, the deal you and I had coming from the same country, you could ask me an easy question, give me 2 hours to make my point. And let me just use this opportunity. First of all, this is the first time I'm sitting on a panel that everyone on the panel is actually connected to the fund that I run. To my left, Carla and I have the responsibility of making sure the countries are ready to access our funding. To my right, Vanuatu, this is the country that we work for in supporting them. France play a major leadership in our fund, both at the board but also contribution. And obviously IFRC will be a great partner in implementing the work we'll be doing. And that is why partnership is extremely critical in what we do. Let me make two important points. First of all, a little bit on the problem as we see it. And maybe share with you some of the key pillars that I see to be part of the solution so we can enhance responding in responses to loss and damage across the most vulnerable countries. Just prior to this meeting, I had a very insightful discussion with the Minister of Disaster Risk Management of Somalia. He spent a great deal of time sensitizing me about the impact of loss and damage in this country and the impact it has on the most vulnerable communities. And about 10 days ago, I was in Nepal. I had a conversation with the government, with a similar exercise trying to sensitize me to the impact of loss and damage in the mountains and flooding. And about a few months ago, I was in Barbados looking at the damage of Hurricane Beryl and the impact it has on the country. Now, what all these disasters have in common with regard to loss and damage is a human face. The people that are affected, whose life are affected. So this is not just technicalities, it affects the life of many people. It's important as we discuss some of the solutions we think about also the people that expect so much from us and we can't disappoint them. In my view, the solutions is a long list of what I call the key pillars. Number one, and as we heard from Vanuatu, and this is something we believe as a fund, anything we do has to be country-led. The countries know the problem they're faced with, and so therefore, by empowering them to share their needs and the demand, it's our way of building sustainable solution in dealing with loss and damage. I think second, our fund is a great example of what you can achieve through global solidarity. And about a few years ago, when this fund was announced to be operationalized, many were doubtful. In less than a year, we're able to not only get pledges up to $766 million, we're able to actually have a host of the fund, but more importantly, have a secretary that I run, and now we're talking about obviously supporting the countries as well. But that global solidarity got us to where we are, but that global solidarity is needed for us to get to the next level, and that is to highly capitalize the fund so we can get into the billions, so we can actually support the countries because the demand is huge. The third pillar is we have to talk the talk and walk the walk. In other words, we at the fund strongly believe that out of the funding that we have mobilized so far, we need to begin to engage and support the countries. And that is why our board, about a few months ago, made a commitment to allocate about $250 million to support the most vulnerable countries, looking at extreme weather conditions, slow onset, but I see in the Minter when some of the audiences I can stated the importance of rapid response, because that's how you save life, and that is the way we're going to look at the early interventions. I think the fourth part of the solution is that it is extremely critical to recognize not one institution alone can do this to be impactful, and that's why it's going to be a combination of actors, and that's the reason why at the spring meeting in the World Bank, we decided under the leadership of the board to launch what we call a high-level dialogue, so we can bring all the players around the table and begin to have a conversation whereby the solution may come from different sources, and together holistically we can support the country as long as what we provide as the support is country-led, bottom-up, so that Vanuatu, what we do as a fund is actually relevant to your needs. And the last 2 points I want to make is that it is extremely critical to recognize the civil society, the indigenous group, who are at the forefront on a daily basis, looking at the challenges in dealing with loss and damage on the in the field, they should be part of the solution. That's why in our board, as we actually discuss the fundamentals of the fund, we consult with civil society and make sure their voices are heard, and that is also the way we're approaching loss and damage as well. Let me wrap up by saying I've been struggling is what does success look like? To me, it's a combination of things. Number one, we have to be impactful and make sure that when we mobilize these resources, they're actually relevant to the problem of the country we support it. And that's why I look forward to us providing support to the most vulnerable countries, particularly the seeds and the LDCs who are demanding for the fund to really respond to the needs as quickly as possible. I think second, there is no point of announcing billions of dollars that are not accessible. And that is why any fund, including ours, has to be nimble, accessible, flexible, so that countries and those that we're trying to support, they don't have to take forever to access our funding. Last but not least, partnership, partnership, partnership. As I started, everyone on this panel is part of the solution. And I believe if you join our forces, we may be able at least to be relevant to the countries we're trying to support, so that going back to the human phase, no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ibrahim. You have really also touched on very, very crucial issues. That one thing all these disasters have in common is that it has a human face. And this is why, when we are making solutions, when we're sitting in decision-making rooms and discussing solutions, we need to think about these people that are impacted, because they depend on us to make sure we are building their resilience. And you have also mentioned something that is also very important. That is global solidarity and partnership. That the fund will not work if we do not build strong partnerships and solidarity, because every single stakeholder is very crucial in making sure that the fund works. And you have also, before you wrapped up, talked about walking the talk. Because we can sit in discussions and make promises and talk about so many issues. But what is very important is making sure we are putting into practice what we are talking about. So we need to make sure we are walking the talk, as he's mentioned. And then also the fact that the fund recognizes the important role of civil society organizations as well as indigenous groups is something that is very crucial, because far too often these groups are mostly overlooked or not even brought to the table when we're having conversations like this. So the fact the fund is really emphasizing on this group is really very important, because nothing for us without us is not for us. So I will move on to our next speaker, because Mr. Ibrahim has really mentioned very, very important points. And just to remind the audience here, I'm sure you're really enjoying the conversation, but please do not forget that you are also part of the conversation. So that is why, if you have any questions, please scan the QR code again and type your questions so that we can be able to ask our speakers more questions, but also to hold them accountable. So Mr. Ibrahim, thank you so much. And obviously, the only lady in the panel, can we please give a round of applause to Miss Carolina? So we've had from Mr. Ibrahim, we've had from Honorable Minister Raf and Kamal, and also Mr. Benoit, Honorable Benoit, about some really important points around loss and damage, but also more around integration, partnership, solidarity, finance, and inclusion, among others. So at the Santiago Network, we understand the importance of action and support to address climate change impact. It's actually well recognized. But we would love to hear from you, especially to elaborate on how the Santiago Network is supporting developing countries in accelerating action on loss and damage, one, but also what were your key takeaways from the recent high-level dialogue on loss and damage, especially in the context of complementary and coherence, and how do you see the role of disaster risk reduction in climate action?
Many thanks, Fatou, and I'm very pleased also to start with a round of applause. Many thanks for that. And I appreciate also the timely question that you're making, precisely in light of the recent approval of Vanuatu technical assistance request that now is moving swiftly into implementation. That marks the operational debut of the Santiago network. It's very significant for us and a defining moment, as has been put also by the Minister and the Prime Minister of Vanuatu. We're building on their leadership and also their voice in the international arena to make sure that we can also support Vanuatu's efforts in responding to loss and damage. So we're very happy for that, very glad to celebrate. It's a moment of celebration for the whole multilateral ecosystem of loss and damage. Many thanks, Minister, and congratulations to Vanuatu on this achievement. And that's precisely the clearest example for me to explain how the Santiago network is accelerating efforts and support on loss and damage in developing countries. It's very good that we have the example of Vanuatu because that gives us a very concrete reference point as well to walk you through how we provide the support and how we support as well action that is bold and that is transformative. We're very also happy to see that that action is leading to a national program that will be able to support the people in Vanuatu at large, and is also intended to lead to a funding proposal to access the fund for responding to loss and damage. So as Ibrahima put it, we're all here connected. At some point, the technical assistance request that is coming through the Santiago network will deliver also a proposal that will be submitted to the fund. That is one of the intents. Now, in terms also of how we support that bold transformative action on loss and damage, I would like perhaps also to point three specific features of the Santiago network. To begin with, the catalytic role that we play by supporting developing countries in identifying their needs and priorities, and also identifying the member to the network that can be best suited to provide technical assistance to respond to that request. So we're doing a matchmaking between the need and the support and the resources that exist in the ecosystem. That's one of the key roles we play. And also with this role, we're moving the conversation from the recognition of loss and damage to real concrete action on the ground. That is what the Santiago network steps in to inject that real concrete action. That takes me to the second feature that I would like to underline of the Santiago network, and that is the technical assistance that is demand-driven. This comes from the countries. This comes from the proponents. This comes from the people in developing countries. And that was the case in Vanuatu. The technical assistance was developed through a consultative participatory process within the country that led to the design of the technical assistance request. You have a working group on loss and damage that is convening all the important stakeholders working on the subject matter, and that led to the request being developed and presented to us. So that is a model for other countries to follow. That is important for us because technical assistance is to be locally relevant and also context specific. And that's the intent also with Vanuatu. The third feature is our network of members. We have 54 members now, and that already builds a very vibrant ecosystem of expertise on loss and damage that is of value for Santiago Network and other partners, but most importantly, is of value for developing countries. That ecosystem will continue growing, and some of their members are present in this room. So also you are part of the response, and it's very good also to see that both in the panel and in the audience we have people as well that is supporting strongly the response to loss and damage. I would like also to note our recent decision, the decision from the Advisory Board on Regional Presence, that is making also the support of the Santiago Network more locally relevant, and we trust this will be of value for the entire loss and damage ecosystem. I would be closing also with the second point that you asked in relation to the high-level dialogue on loss and damage. First, congratulating Ibrahima for convening this dialogue together with the Secretary General. It was very enriching also to hear the variety of perspectives. Importantly as well, one of the key takeaways for us is the importance of acting in prevention. That space is an important space because that is where most of lives can be saved, and also the one that can provide a greater agency to communities in deciding about their future, preventing to the disaster before it happens. So that is also a space where the Santiago Network can support, and as mentioned in other interventions, any divide between loss and damage, adaptation, and climate support is artificial. We need to make sure that that's integrated. And lastly, the importance of a new concept of collaboration that came strongly also as part of the high-level dialogue. Now we need to collaborate not only as external partners, but we need to make our objectives integral to our own objectives and priorities. That is why we're collaborating shoulder to shoulder with the FRLD and with others here in the panel, and also with the members here in the room, to make sure that together we achieve much more than what we could be able to achieve in terms of impact and support to developing countries alone. Many, many thanks, Fatou. Back to you, and appreciate.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really very, very interesting points you've also raised, Ms. Carolina, but also for us to congratulate the Santiago Network on the partnership between the government of Vanuatu. As you have mentioned, we are now trying to move the conversations from recognizing just loss and damage, but taking real actions on the ground, because that is what matters the most. We all know about the level of vulnerabilities from countries and communities in terms of disaster and climate, but what we really need to take more action on is doing things on the ground to make sure that we're supporting communities to actually respond, because that is what matters the most, taking actions. And it's really good that you have highlighted this, that you are now trying to take more actions instead of just recognizing loss and damage. And most importantly, you've talked about the importance of the technical assistance you're offering countries and making sure that it is locally relevant. So it is important to ensure that the supports that are offered to countries are relevant to the local needs and the realities of communities, and that is something that is very crucial that you have also highlighted. So we really look forward to the work of the Santiago Network on responding to loss and damage and climate, as well as the Fund for responding to the loss and damage. So these are really two very crucial institutions, and we're really looking forward to the work ahead. So this will bring me to our final speaker for today before we have the audience join us. Mr. Jagan, Secretary General for the International Federation of Red Cross and the Red Crescent Societies. So we understand that the IFRC is the world's largest humanitarian network. So we would love to hear from your perspectives, especially from communities dealing with loss and damage on the front line, and then also how you see the two key loss and damage mechanisms, the Santiago Network and the FRLD, building the resilience of communities. So how can these two mechanisms really maximize value in coherence with disaster risk reduction? We have two of their directors here, and I'm sure your inputs and your recommendations will be very, very crucial for them.
Thank you. So your second part of the questions, I don't know how will I answer in front of Ibrahim and Carolina here, but I will try my best. No, first of all, thank you. Thank you for convening here. I know it's the almost end of the day. I'm sure you have attended many, many events. So if you are still here in the room and listening means you are very, very committed. So I really want to thank you and congratulate you for that. So you asked me about the community perspective. Of course, when we talk about the climate crisis or the loss and damage, we are talking about people's lives. I think it's Ralph and Ibrahim mentioned earlier. We are talking about their livelihoods. We are talking about their health. And in many cases, their future of their family, their children. Of course, here in this panel today, we are talking about loss and damage. But we all know that when we go to the community, I have an opportunity to go to the communities, including in Vanuatu. I had a chance to meet the minister. And in Gambia, your country, I visited many, many villages together. And when you talk to the communities, they don't use the word loss and damage exactly. Mm-hmm. But they express this in their own way. They express that we don't have access to safe water anymore. We have to walk 4 or 5 hours to fetch the water, which is drinkable. They talk about food security, not being able to feed their children because their harvest was washed away. They talk about accessing school for their children because the schools have been destroyed, or in some cases, the schools are used as houses for displaced people to live. They themselves become displaced at times because they have lost their homes. And the homes are no longer safe. They have lost their savings or their income, so they don't have means to recover back. And that was one of the conversations I had when I met Minister in Vanuatu. We had a planned cash program where the program was not that popular in the country. So I went to meet the minister and he sorted it out in 30 seconds. So when you have the leader who sees how to do things, solutions can be found in 30 seconds. So that those people who were impacted could actually rebuild their lives, because the cash, as we know, is the best way of recovering lives. And in many places, they also talk about cultural loss, their traditions, their history, their belongings, their meaning to be in that place. This is how people describe loss and damage when you go and talk to the communities. In their own words, in their own feelings. For them, it's not a technical topic. It's about their own experience and what their families are going through. And we heard a lot. I think we really, really have to focus our solutions at the local level. We heard the minister and other speakers. But we also need to talk about getting the finances at the local level. Fatu, you talked about, of course, not enough financing. But we also have a second problem. The second problem is even the bi-level financing is not reaching the community level. First, we don't have enough financing. The second, the financing is not reaching. And I get to travel to many, many countries, many, many communities impacted by climate crisis. And a lot of billions that was announced in different events, they don't get to see them in most of the times. I had one climate minister telling me that I would not go to COP anymore because I get questioned all the time. Where is that money that was announced in the COP you attended? And I cannot answer those questions to my parliament and my communities. These are some of the realities we hear at the community level. Now, I think also what we as a community-based organization feel all the time is there are also multiple crises which are not on the news. Right now, for us, we are responding to flood in South Africa, in Tanzania, in DRC, drought in Somalia. None of them are in the news, global news. And it's also extremely important that the suffering of the people is the same, whether they are on the CNN or the BBCs or not. But because they are not on the news, they get forgotten. And extremely important that we don't forget them. So from the community perspective, what we feel is maybe the 3 points. One is clearly, and we also saw that in Slido, the acting ahead of the disasters, the early warning. Kamal said before, I loved what he said is, prevention is better than cure. No, prevention is the cure. And I really loved that saying. The second is, I think, ensuring fast response. And Ibrahima, you ended by saying that leaving no one behind. And that's where efficient system and including the use of cash becomes extremely important. And in Red Cross, we have innovated, very innovative ways of getting cash very, very quickly to people. And third is really investing on foundational issues so that when people have suffered the loss and damage, we have mechanism to respond to that. And when I talk to the communities, a lot of times they feel that sometimes what happens in the name of listening to the communities, we also go and ask them questions all the time while they are looking for solutions. So we have to balance between the asking questions and helping them find the solutions. So these are a few of the things extremely, extremely important to keep in mind. And now, second part of your question, I don't have much time. The way I see the Santiago Network and Loss and Damage Fund is maybe one is heart, one is head. Ibrahim has a great heart to give the money, and Carolina has great mind to give the technical advice. And I think when those two things come together, I think we have good outcomes. So please work as heart and head together. And I know they're already doing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jagan. Your intervention really shows the important role humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross plays, especially in responding to disasters and the climate crisis. You have clearly showed in your example, especially how you go to communities, to engage communities, to really hear about their challenges, and you're bringing this on board in conversations, but also in terms of the solutions in addressing this. And you have mentioned really, really critical issues, especially around the fact that in most communities, sometimes they do not explicitly mention that what they're facing is loss and damage, but you can clearly, from the examples they give, like that's the same. For instance, in the Gambia, like you see for farmers, like will share how the climate crisis is really impacting their production. For example, my father is a farmer, and over the years, he's been seeing how the climate problems has actually impacted his level of yield in his agricultural produce. But he wouldn't specifically say it's as a result of the climate crisis, but he would really know that something terrible is happening. He used to have bags of maize. Ibrahim will know this. Gambia and Senegal, maize is one of our best staple food. If you've visited these countries, we call it chere. Every time we're eating chere for breakfast, for lunch, and dinner. So see, like it's really important. So, but we're seeing how these damages are actually really impacting livelihoods and communities. And you have really brought in this reality. So how do we make sure that people really understand that this is loss and damage, and then this is as a result of the climate crisis? So conversations like this are really, really crucial. And then also, as you have mentioned, disasters happening in vulnerable communities are most of the time not really even televised. So it becomes very difficult for some people, especially in other parts of the world, to really know what is happening, especially in communities that are very much vulnerable and are marginalized. So how do we make sure that more coverage is actually provided so people really understand what is happening around the world, so we can be able to take action? Because seeing also could help people to really understand and empathize and be able to take action. And indeed, as you've mentioned, prevention is the cure. Thank you so much. So this will take us now to the floor for the question and answer segment of this particular conversation. But first of all, really, really huge thanks to our speakers, because they've really brought in really interesting and insightful perspectives from the different works they actually do, but also how we can be able to work together as well collectively. And to open the floor for the question and answer session as well as intervention, I would just like to remind participants here today that please do not forget to use Slido to share your questions, because we will ask the speakers the questions that you have. But also, if you would like to share your reflections about the session, your comments, your thoughts, and your contributions, please do not forget to use the hashtag Act for Resilience Today and hashtag Everyday Counts when you're sharing your updates on social media platforms. So I would love to call on Mr. Dominique from FAO to make an intervention from the floor. So Mr. Dominique, you have 3 minutes, and we would really love to hear from you.
Can you hear me? Yes? No? And no? Yes, okay. No, first of all, I would like to really thank the panel for your great intervention, for really referring to the suffering of the farmers, the challenge they are going through day in, day out. And this is, as you can imagine, a source of main concern for an organization like FAO. And therefore, we have put this issue of damage and loss and damage, really at the center of our work. And we have documented the increasing impact of disaster on the agri-food system. And as a matter of fact, we have documented that over the last 30 years, an estimated 3.8 trillion worth of crops and livestock production has been lost due to disaster, corresponding to an average loss of 123 billion per year, equivalent to 5% of the global agricultural GDP. So this is really huge. At the same time, what we see is that the number of food crises, people facing acute food insecurity, facing potential risk of famine is increasing. For the last 6 years in a row, this number is increasing, now reaching in 2024, we had 295 million people facing acute food insecurity in 53 countries. And what is striking in that in 18 of these countries, for about 100 million people, the main driver of food insecurity was extreme weather events. So these two challenges, increased in the intensity and frequency of natural disaster and acute food insecurity, are closely related. So therefore, what do we do at FAO? Of course, we support our members. We support our members first in strengthening risk information systems, in enhancing early warning system, and in documenting appropriate disaster risk reduction practices, showing their return on investment. In the same way, we work towards anticipatory action, supporting anticipatory action whenever we have the triggers, and also documenting their return on investment that can reach up to $7 in avoided loss for every $1 invested. So significant return on investment. In the meantime, what we are doing to better guide intervention, we are working on methodologies to assess losses in agriculture due to extreme and slow onset events, and we hope to release some technical guidance by COP30. Finally, if I still have 30 seconds, to say that in terms of financing, of course, we are very concerned. Agri-food system only receives 5% of global climate finance, despite absorbing 23% of the total cost of these disasters. And more importantly, because many of you were referring to smallholder farmers, I mean, those smallholder farmers, while shouldering 1/3 of the global food production, only receive 0.8% of climate financing. So this needs to change, and we advocate, therefore, for a dedicated window for smallholders to benefit from that sort of funding as we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dominique. Really, very, scaring and alarming figures that you've shared here today in your intervention. But what's really very sad is the fact that, as you have mentioned, agri-food system receives just 5% of global climate financing, and just 0.1% of climate financing for smallholder farmers. In our part of the world, many of our farmers are actually smallholder farmers. So to hear that this little amount of financing is provided to smallholder farmers is really very scary. And that is why it's important we need to have more conversations around committing and fulfilling the finance commitments that we continue to make every single year. Because at the end of the day, it is this kind of people that are really severely impacted and need this kind of financing the most. So thank you so much for that. So I will call on Mr. Chen, who is the Vice Rector in Europe and Director of the UN University, the Institute for Environment and Human Security, to share his intervention in 2 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, you are there. Thank you.
Hello? Yeah, great. Okay, let me just go back a little bit to the word cloud. I saw the words prevention and data very bigly written. Prevention, I think many people have mentioned, and you said prevention is the cure. We all know that. But why we do not invest enough in prevention? One of the reasons is that it's politically risky to invest in prevention because you cannot prove your achievements, because if you do enough prevention, the event might not occur. So this leads to the short-termism thinking. I want to point out short-termism is not in our human DNA. We can change it. If you think about indigenous people, they always think 7 generations ahead. I think they provide us a blueprint for long-termism thinking. So we need to ask ourselves the ethical question. As a politician, am I doing the right thing, or am I just doing the thing to keep my political power? My second point is about data, which was also in the word cloud. Our institute has done some study in Latin America. We found out we actually want to reach the most vulnerable communities, most vulnerable people, but actually we do not really have the data about them. What they have been taken as measures for prevention and mitigation, we don't know what they're doing, and we also do not provide them support. Yesterday, I heard from a Brazilian delegate. She said, remote from cities in the peripheries is also remote from policies. That got really stuck with me. If we don't know what they're doing, we don't have data from them, then we cannot put policies in place to support them and to really gauge their needs. So locally resourced information is absolutely key to this. The third point I want to make is from the second compendium on comprehensive disaster risk management, which was were drafted by my institute, by my colleagues here. And in that compendium, we wrote a call for transformative actions. I just want to mention 2 actions. One action is innovative urban planning. Another is communication strategy. I think for both of them, we have positive examples around the world. In Bangkok, for instance, they use nature-based solutions to build urban parks and to mitigate CO2, and in the meantime, increase people's well-being and also to manage flood risk. In the meantime, reserve water for dry season.
Okay.
So there are examples around the world. We need to focus on positive narratives and to give people more hope than desperation.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You have really hit the nail on the head that there are some positive actions happening around the world. So we need to make sure we are sharing this more so we can keep people more hopeful. But I think hope will come from when we take more actions and protect people, their future, their lives, and their livelihoods. And thank you so much for that intervention. And as you've mentioned, we need to ask ourselves if we're doing the right thing, because we need to be very morally right and just when it comes to taking action, because at the end of the day, if we don't take actions, the generation to come will definitely judge us and ask us what we did wrong and what we did right. And then now we will come to the questions. We have really very interesting questions from the audience. Thank you so much for contributing and asking these really important questions to our speakers. Conscious that Mr. Jagan has to leave for another session, I will start with you. The first question from the audience is not from me or from the organizers. They want to ask, or they want to know, that if we are serious about localization and civil society actors being at the forefront of solutions, how can these actors access financing directly? So they said if we're really serious about that, how do we make sure, especially around localization, how do we make sure that civil society actors in the forefront have access to funding?
I will ask Ibrahima to answer this question. No, but it's a very, very, very important question. And last 10 years or so, through the Grand Bargain Initiative, all these high-sounding initiatives that exist, this is what we have been really pushing for. And there have been a lot of push towards that. And in 2015, in Istanbul, it was agreed that the internationally mobilized resources, at least 25%, should be channeled to the local actors. Now, after 10 years, the results are extremely disappointing. On average, it's less than 2%. And I thought the 25% was actually a low bar to achieve. but it's less than 2% at the moment. So if I knew the solution, I would have probably fixed it. But what I want to share with you that this is something we are constantly arguing and constantly pushing and constantly offering ideas and solutions. Now, for the IFRC ourselves, because we are also an international organization with the membership in 191 countries, we do help mobilize resources internationally. So in our case, for the Emergency Response Fund, we have managed to transfer up to 83% of the funding to our local organizations. So we are very proud of our own records that 83% of the funding we have managed to channel. And I am constantly challenging to my friends and peers that, yeah, if not 83%, at least let's achieve 25%, because we all committed to that. And so it's not a straight answer to you, but this is something we have to continue to push for, fight for, because that's the only way the real and sustainable change will come.
Definitely.
Otherwise it won't.
Thank
So
you.
as Fatu said, I need to go, so I'm not leaving because I don't agree or anything like that. So there is no political message. I just need to go to another meeting. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much. Please give Mr. Jagan a round of applause for his very insightful contribution today. Just a reminder, the session will be available on the UNDRR website after the event if you would like to watch it or share with your network. So we will move on to the next question. That is for Mr. Raf Regenvenue. So the audience asked, what is the catalytic impact you foresee from the technical assistance you will receive through the San Diego network? What impact are you looking forward to seeing with the partnership that you have with the San Diego network?
Thank you. So one of the things we want to set up is a community access fund. So we have a loss and damage fund that communities can apply for. So this is about getting money directly to the community. Have a system in place. We can meet. We can have our local actors on the panel. Now, I've talked about the systems we have, the National Advisory Board and so on, and the Loss and Damage Advisory Committee. That's one. Another one is we want to get money from Ibrahim. That's one of the big objectives. We have putting together that project proposal, which will set up this fund and so on. But another one is trying to figure out what is loss and damage in Vanuatu. What does it mean for people in Vanuatu? There's cultural loss and damage. There's loss of biodiversity. There's health loss and damage, right? Quantifying it, qualifying it, and putting it into a national vision for how we're going to address it. Because a lot of these are questions that we don't know yet. And it's very context specific. We want to do that knowledge building, awareness raising, identifying the capacity gaps, particularly non-economic loss and damage is is something very, very close to Vanuatu, because we don't have much, as a just recently graduated LDC, we do not have the financial capacity, but we do have our traditional economy and so on. And that is what we are losing, our support base. And so we need to quantify that and know how to address that loss. So that's some of the things.
Thank you so much, Minister Raf. I really am looking forward to updates on the Community Access Fund that you've mentioned. Looks to be, will be quite an interesting one. And Ibrahim, they're all pointing or coming back to you to bring more money. So, Mr. Ambassador Benoit, another question from the audience. And the question is, we all agree on the 25 agendas, policy coherence and collaboration. But where is the urgency? How can you see hope in light of decreasing multilateral solidarity?
It's a tricky question. And I will not make a political statement on this, but rather build on on experiences we've heard from today, including in this discussion, because I mean, at the end of the day, what we are seeing working on the ground is multilateralism at work. I mean, what is happening in Vanuatu, what is happening in other countries that are benefiting from our cruise initiative, for instance, it's multilateralism at work. It's multilateralism for people. It's not multilateralism for meeting, for decision maker. It's multilateralism on the ground, and I like that. And that's my hope also in this conversation. And maybe also to elaborate a little bit on how we can basically build bridges between our discussion, what we are doing in various fora and trying to implementing loss and damage, DRR, and so on, and the global economy. For instance, I strongly disagree when we say, for instance, it's very difficult to demonstrate that prevention is not profitable because when you prevent, you avoid the risk, and at the end of the day, you cannot demonstrate the economic of that. And it's terrifying to say that, but we are living in a world where climate has changed already, and we are people already adapting with private money, with public money, and in various situations, and we see that a lot, and that's why also the discussion from the colleague from the FIO was quite interesting. In food and agriculture system, we see already actors implementing adaptation strategy that are profitable. For instance, we see it in cocoa, we see it in coffee, by developing agroecologists and adaptation strategy, because it enhances resilience of soils and prevent production from drop for growth and so on. So it avoids adaptation, prevention avoids loss and damage, and is profitable. Because at the end of the day, if you maintain your production of coffee or cocoa while misadapted crops are like collapsing, you make profit on the market. And you are funding loss and damage from a private initiative, which is great. It's not an alternative to public money and to public solidarity, because of course, as Minister says, there are like some elements, including cultural elements, that cannot be paid by the market, of course. But we need also to take this lesson from what we have developed in this kind of initiative, in cruise, in other partnership under DRR that are working, I mean, and we have results, and to see that this is a proof that there is still hope in this year, and this is a conversation we need to have in Belém collectively. We are here, and we are here to stay, to act for people, and we have results. And that's, for me, the best proof of what Vanuatu, Ibrahim and others, and the Santiago Network are doing. Maybe it's a small scale at this stage, but it's a proof of concept.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for that very insightful response to that question. And then that will bring me to Mr. Jung. You and Ms. Carolina have so many questions from the audience, but obviously we have time constraints, so I will just ask each of you one question, but just know there are about like 3 to 4 questions for each of you. So, Mr. Jung, the first question from the audience is, what is the outlook for additional pledges to the fund? What will sustain funding to the fund itself? So,
well, let's start with where we are today in actually honoring the pledges and the commitment made across the 2-3 COPs. It was about $766 million coming from 27 contributors, and 22 out of the 27 have signed a contribution agreement, and 19 of them have released their commitment to the fund, including France to my right. So if you look at that trend, that means at least countries are actually honoring their commitment, and that is why we're able to use the early contribution that we get to launch the early intervention of the fund. Now, as I said earlier, it's certainly not enough, but we need to start demonstrating from what we have our ability to respond to the needs and the demand as Vanuatu or other countries that are also vulnerable. So while we're doing that, and we've been also looking at the longer term resource mobilization, whereby in addition to the public money, as Bernard said earlier, what else is out there available? What is philanthropy, private sector, or maybe other ways of mobilizing resources? But it is very important, while we're mobilizing the billions, we also have to make sure what we have so far is actually impactful, but also support the countries as they need them. It is also important, and I mentioned earlier, what I call the AAA of climate finance: affordability, accessibility, and availability of funding. I think what I hear from the countries, they do not want to hear billions of dollars are not accessible to those who need them the most, and that's why, as far as we're concerned, we're looking at the lesson that we learned from other funds with regard to accreditation, lesson that we can learn in terms of the system that's put in place to make sure countries have access to the funding. But more importantly, our focus, it's not on the bureaucracy of administrative fund. Our focus is providing funding where it's needed so that we can claim, thanks to our funding, thanking to all the intervention, we've saved lives, rebuilt the infrastructure, and we are relevant to the countries need us the most, and that's why the expectation is such. The faster we move to actually intervening and less mobilizing resources, the more we can claim that our fund is like being impactful. So the next time I see Vanuatu at a meeting, I can look him in the eyes, and I've been able to at least make a difference in your country, and that's where we want to be.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Jong. We really hope all those things are actually achieved, as well as ensuring the fund is really being utilized the most, but also bringing in more funding for these countries, as you've mentioned. Ms. Carolina, another question from the audience. The Green Climate Fund, the GEF, and other funding instruments struggle to find good projects. They asked, isn't it rather needed to provide more technical assistance to design projects?
Excellent question as well, because I think it also speaks to the need to learn from the experience. And the experience is not only the experience of our own organizations. In our case, we're just starting up operations, and this year, 2025, is the year of full operationalization of the Santiago network. We need to learn from the experience of others as well. And there is a wealth of experience on things that have succeeded, and also on lessons that we can learn to leapfrog and make sure that this time around, when we support concept notes for the development of funding proposals, those can be developed in a manner that also quality is considered. So there is quality at entry when there is support for the design of a funding proposal that is intended to access the FRLD, the GCF, other climate funds. We can also, in the Santiago network, be knowledgeable, and that also speaks to the strength of our membership. We need to have membership as well that can help us design funding proposals that meet the investment criteria and the requirements of the funds. So getting support and technical assistance from the Santiago network can also be kind of a seal of quality of that funding proposal before that reaches the fund or the funding channel that is intended to reach. I fully agree that there is a number of concept notes that may not translate into a project. There are lessons to learn from all of them, and those lessons can also inform the Santiago network in being more efficient when we provide support for designing proposals for loss and damage. And of course, we will be collaborating with these other organizations to learn from them.
Okay, great. So lesson learned is something that's very crucial for the work of the San Diego network. So we have almost, okay, I wouldn't give the time, but we're about to wrap up the session. But I have one question from the audience that is really itching me, and I want to know and also hear from the speakers, because I am also very curious to also learn or just hear from the speakers on their thoughts. And this, Mr. Ibrahim, Ms. Carolina, both of you, 30 seconds each, maximum. What is a practical example where the San Diego network and the lost and damaged funding could work together? So how can Ibrahim, how can Carolina actually work together? One example, concrete example in 30 seconds.
30 seconds or 2 hours?
No, 30 seconds.
Well, the good news is we actually have signed a letter of intent, decide to work together. So that's a good starting point. we're formalizing our relationship. I think second, there are two scenarios, and one, countries will approach us. They're ready and bring us proposals that we can consider because the quality of the proposal is such, we could look at the base on our funding criteria. But there may be possibilities where countries will approach it with something that requires using the readiness support from Santiago Network. So that way we can increase the level of the portfolio, the quality of what we look at. And I think eventually it's going to be a very dynamic process between Santiago Network and ourselves, because ultimately the focus is not on us, the focus is in the countries we're helping. As long as we can provide the solutions, that's all we care about. The rest is something internal within our institutions.
Definitely. So the solution is what you care about. Mr. Ibrahim, I gave you 30 seconds and you took 5 hours, so it's fine. So, Ms. Carolina, in 30 seconds.
I will compensate for those 5 hours because that's the way in which we complement as well. We're well coordinated. Well, in 30 seconds, a very concrete example is the example of Vanuatu here. Now the technical assistance that has been approved and that is moving to implementation has as a first step also a visioning exercise at the country level. Both the Santiago Network and the fund were country-driven and demand-driven. So those visioning exercises can support the potential proponents in identifying the requests for funding that would like to go to the FRLD or to other funds. So that's the way in which it can be done, and it is doable. And we will have also the proof of concept with Vanuatu in here, and that's moving to implementation now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carolina. Thank you so much to our amazing, amazing speakers. If you have learned something from our speakers today, can you please give them a huge round of applause? Thank you so much to everyone that have joined us today. I would like to thank the organizers of the session for doing a good job curating this event and inviting our amazing experts today. Special thanks to Aminesh from the UNDRR office. Thank you so much for leading the session. To Leanne from the UNDRR office, to Lucas and all the team that have really set up this event. And also special thanks to our audience who are really joining us, staying throughout the session to engage, to interact, and to also ask questions to our speakers. And to our amazing speakers here today, Ms. Carolina, Mr. Ibrahim, Honorable Minister Raf, Ambassador Benoit, to Mr. Jagan, and also Kamal, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your expert contributions and the work that you do. Thank you so much. And if you think I did a good job, can you give me a huge round of applause? Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Fatou Jeng, Advisory Panel Member of the UN Early Warning for All Initiative. And most recently, about 30 minutes before the start of the event, I made it to the Forbes 30 under 30 Africa list.